The call came on a Tuesday, shattering the stale air of my Denver office. My brother, Ethan. His voice was a little too smooth. "Hey, Cal, just a heads up. I'm putting a new fence up on the old family parcel, the North Quarter." My hand froze over a geological survey for a client. The North Quarter was our land, inherited jointly. "A fence? That's a big expense, Ethan. What for?" He laughed, a brittle sound that scraped down the line. "Just keeping the property tidy, brother. You know me." Oh, I knew him. And every instinct I had, honed from years of searching for what lies beneath the surface, told me he was hiding something big. I hung up, the dial tone buzzing in my ear like an angry wasp. Ethan. The golden boy. The high school quarterback who charmed his way through life while I was the quiet one, happier with a rock hammer than a football. He'd stayed in our hometown, selling used cars with a smile that could disarm a landmine. I left for Denver, building Ridgeback Geological from nothing, my entire life's work based on one simple principle: the earth doesn't lie. People do, and Ethan was lying. Big. A $10,000 fence for tidiness on a piece of rugged, scrub-covered land we hadn't touched in 20 years? It was absurd. People don't build fences like that to keep things tidy. They build them to keep people out. My fingers flew across my keyboard, pulling up the satellite imagery of the North Quarter. It was just as I remembered: rocky, remote, and according to every public survey, worthless. My gut, the same instinct that had located profitable veins for my clients, screamed otherwise. Ethan wasn't tidying up. He was staking a claim. He'd found something. And he was trying to cut me out before I even knew there was a game. My screen glowed with the raw, untamed land of the North Quarter, and the years melted away. Our whole lives were a story of surfaces versus depths. Ethan was the surface. All flash, no substance. The star quarterback. The easy charmer who got the car, the girl, the applause. I was the depth. The quiet kid in the corner with a rock hammer, fascinated by the world no one else could see. While he was chasing popularity, I was chasing geologic time. Our grandfather was the only one who understood. He was a man carved from the very rock he'd spent his life mining, with hands that could tell granite from gneiss by touch alone. He'd seen my collection of quartz and mica, not as a weird hobby, but as a language. "The surface is for show, Caleb," he'd rumble, his voice like stones shifting underground. "The real wealth is always hidden." That memory led to another, sharp and clear, the stale air of the lawyer's office after the funeral. My parents, Ethan and me, listening to the final will and testament. Ethan got grandfather's vintage hunting rifle. I got his collection of geological maps. Then came the land. The primary estate, the house, the profitable southern fields, all designated to pass through my parents, eventually to Ethan. It was expected. He was the one who stayed. We, the grandsons, were bequeathed the unimproved North Quarter to be held in joint tenancy. Ethan had smirked. A silent victory. He'd get the real prize later, and I was shackled to him on a worthless patch of dirt. But then the lawyer, a dry man named Abernathy, cleared his throat and read a final, specific codicil. And to my grandson, Caleb Rowe, because he alone has the eyes to see what is truly there. I bequeath sole and exclusive ownership of all mineral, subsurface, oil, and gas rights on all Rowe family properties in perpetuity. The room was silent. My father shifted in his chair, annoyed by the complication. Ethan just stared for a second, then let out a short, barking laugh. Later, he'd slung an arm around my shoulder, reeking of cheap cologne and condescension. "Mineral rights. What are you going to do, Cal? Start a gravel pit? Don't spend all your rock money in one place." He dismissed it. He forgot it. In his world of surface-level transactions, a thing you couldn't immediately see and sell was worthless. He'd spent 20 years forgetting that single, critical sentence. But I never forgot. I built my entire life on that principle, on seeing what others couldn't. My gaze refocused on the satellite image. Near the center of the parcel, a faint discoloration in the soil, a subtle shift in vegetation. An anomaly. A whisper from the earth that only a man like me could hear. Ethan had stumbled onto grandfather's hidden wealth, completely ignorant that he was trespassing on my claim. He thought he was fencing me out. In reality, he was just marking the spot. 3 hours later, I was heading east out of Denver, the mountains shrinking in my rear-view mirror. My truck ate up the miles, but my mind was moving faster. The tools of my trade were in the back: a portable magnetometer, a core sampler, my trusty Estwing rock hammer. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. This was a professional survey, the most important one of my life. I arrived as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the land. The new fence posts were jarring against the wild landscape, raw pine, stark and aggressive. They weren't just marking a boundary, they were a declaration of war. A cheap, hastily assembled one, but a declaration nonetheless. I parked my truck and walked past the unfinished fence line. The earth was disturbed near that anomaly I'd seen on the satellite image. Tracks from a small excavator. Maybe an auger. Ethan had been busy. He'd hired someone to do some preliminary digging. Sloppy work, but it was enough. I knelt, my fingers tracing the edge of a newly exposed rock face. It wasn't the usual shale and sandstone of the region. This was different. Crystalline veins spiderwebbed through the host rock, with a telltale pinkish hue. Lepidolite. My breath caught in my throat. I pulled my hammer from my belt and chipped off a piece. The rock was dense, heavy. I could see the glint of spodumene crystals. It was a pegmatite dike, and from the look of it, a ridiculously rich one. Lithium. The white gold of the 21st century, powering everything from electric cars to smartphones. This wasn't just a valuable deposit. It was a company-making, life-changing strike, and my brother had stumbled onto it like a fool finding a diamond in a mud puddle. "The hell are you doing here, Caleb?" Ethan's voice cut through the quiet. He stood 50 feet away, hands on his hips, his face a mask of surprise and fury. He was wearing work boots and a stained t-shirt, trying to look the part of the rugged landowner. I stood up, dusting my hands on my jeans. "It's my land too, Ethan. Thought I'd take a look at your new fence." "This has nothing to do with you," he snapped, striding closer. His eyes darted from me to the exposed rock, a flicker of panic in his gaze. "I'm making improvements, increasing the property value. Looks expensive," I said, keeping my voice level. I gestured with my rock hammer toward the dig site. "Doing a little landscaping, too?" His face hardened. "Stay out of it, Cal. This is my project. You're in Denver playing with your little maps. This is the real world." The condescension, the casual dismissal, it was the same as it had been our whole lives. He saw my life's work as a game, a hobby. He was so blinded by his own perceived superiority that the truth was invisible to him. "What did you find, Ethan?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. He laughed, that same brittle sound from the phone. "Found a little something. Enough to finally make this useless piece of dirt worth something. Don't you worry your little geological head about it. I'll handle the business side." He clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture meant to be brotherly but felt like a shove. "You just run back to the city. I'll send you your cut when it's done." My cut. He was offering me table scraps from my own banquet. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. He truly had no idea. He'd forgotten the will. He'd forgotten grandfather's words. He saw me, the quiet boy with the rock hammer, and assumed I was still just as clueless as I was at 16. I gave him a slow nod. "All right, Ethan, you handle it." I turned and walked back toward my truck, feeling his smug, triumphant glare on my back. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd just scared off his nerdy little brother. He didn't see the sample in my pocket, its weight, a solid, satisfying promise. He really thought that was it. A pat on the shoulder and I'd just scurry back to my life, tail between my legs. The fool. The magnificent, arrogant fool. I didn't look back as I reached my truck. I could feel his eyes on me, radiating a smugness so powerful it was practically a physical force. He thought he was watching his nerdy little brother retreat. He was actually watching his entire future crumble, and he was smiling while it happened. I slid into the driver's seat and placed the piece of pegmatite on the dashboard. In the slanted afternoon light, the lepidolite glowed a soft, regal purple. It was more beautiful than any diamond. It wasn't just a rock. It was a key. It was a verdict. It was the physical manifestation of our grandfather's foresight. I started the engine and pulled away, kicking up a plume of dust. I saw Ethan in my rearview mirror, hands on his hips, a king surveying a kingdom he didn't own. At the main road, the sign pointed west for Denver. I turned east, toward the county seat, my phone connected to the truck's Bluetooth, and I dialed. It was picked up on the second ring. "Sarah, it's Caleb Rowe." "Caleb. Everything all right?" Sarah was my lawyer, sharp, efficient, and thankfully devoid of sentimentality. "Everything's perfect," I said, my voice steady. "I need you to do something for me. Pull the original deed for the North Quarter parcel. More importantly, I need a certified copy of my grandfather's will. Specifically, the codicil regarding the mineral rights." There was a pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. "So it's finally happening," she said, a hint of excitement in her voice. "Someone started digging?" "They're putting up a fence," I said, looking at the rock on my dash. "And yes, they've started digging. I'll have the documents ready for you in an hour." "What's the plan?" A slow, cold smile spread across my face. This was the moment where my path diverged from Ethan's forever. He would have charged in, yelling, waving his fists. He would have made it a brawl. But I wasn't a brawler, I was a geologist. I understood pressure, time, and the inevitable, grinding power of bedrock truth. "The plan, Sarah," I said, "is to do nothing. We're going to let him build his fence. We're going to let him hire his surveyors, maybe even bring in some heavy equipment. We're going to let him borrow against his house and spend every last dollar he has chasing this. He's trespassing, and every cent he spends is just improving my property for free." Silence on the other end of the line. Then a low chuckle. "Caleb, that is beautifully ruthless." "He thinks this is the real world," I murmured, turning onto the road that led to the county courthouse. "I'm just going to give him a very expensive lesson in what's real." The county courthouse was a tired brick monolith, smelling of old paper and floor wax. An hour after my call with Sarah, I was standing at the records counter, a manila envelope in my hand. The clerk, a woman with a magnificent beehive of gray hair, looked at me over her glasses. "Can I help you, sir?" "Yes," I said, sliding the documents across the polished counter. "I need to file these against Parcel 7B North. It's a certified copy of a testamentary codicil and a notice of claim." She picked up the papers, her eyes scanning the legal text. Sarah had been efficient, as always. The language was ironclad, referencing the will, the property deed, and the specific state statutes governing subsurface rights. The clerk's eyebrows lifted slightly as she read. She looked from the paper to me, then back again. Finally, she took a heavy, satisfying rubber stamp and slammed it down. "Man. Incos." The sound echoed in the quiet hall. "Filed and recorded as of today's date," she said. Her voice neutral. She handed me a receipt. That was it. No fanfare, no dramatic confrontation. Just a quiet, indelible mark in the public record. A time bomb set to a timer of Ethan's own making. I walked out into the blinding sunlight, the receipt folded in my pocket. Now, the hardest part, the waiting. I drove back to Denver and threw myself into my work at Ridgeback Geological. I analyzed seismic data for a mining conglomerate, mapped aquifers for a desperate township, and lived my life. But every day, I watched. The 21st century has its own forms of quiet surveillance. From my office, I had a God's eye view. High-resolution satellite imagery, updated weekly, told the first part of the story. The small scar on the north quarter grew. The faint track from the initial auger became a graded dirt road. I saw the silver glint of heavy machinery arriving on flatbed trucks, excavators, bulldozers. Ethan wasn't just digging a hole. He was building a small-scale mining operation on pure, unadulterated hope and ignorance. Then came the public records. A new lien appeared on the property, filed by a heavy equipment rental company. A few weeks later, another one, this time from a local engineering firm. Ethan was paying for surveyors, for operators, for fuel. He was burning through cash. But the real masterstroke of his arrogance came when he filed for a second mortgage on his house. The beautiful home he and his wife had built, his castle, the ultimate symbol of his success as our town's premier car salesman. He was betting everything, all of it, on land that, a few feet below the surface, belonged entirely to me. The phone call I knew was coming finally arrived on a Thursday evening. I was at my desk, looking at the latest satellite photo. The operation had stalled. The big machines were sitting idle. "Cal," Ethan's voice was tight, the forced joviality of a man drowning in his own suit. "How's the rock business?" "It's good, Ethan. What's up?" "Listen, I've hit a bit of a logistical snag out here," he said, the words catching in his throat. "Cash flow. The initial outlay for this thing is bigger than I thought. A real tiger by the tail." He laughed, a hollow, desperate sound. "I was thinking, since this is going to make us both rich, maybe you could, front me a little capital, just to get over the hump. Say 50,000? It's for our project, after all." The sheer, breathtaking gall of it almost made me laugh. He was standing in my gold mine asking me to pay for his shovel. I let the silence hang for a moment, letting him stew in it. "Ethan, I'm sorry to hear you're having trouble," I said, my voice calm, measured. "But all my capital is tied up. I just took on a major new contract. Ridgeback is stretched thin as it is." "Stretched thin? Cal, this is a sure thing." The assays came back. "My God, you wouldn't believe the numbers. We're sitting on a mountain of lithium. This isn't some game with maps. This is real money." "It sounds like it," I said, keeping my tone sympathetic. "But I can't help you. My business comes first. You know how it is." The line went dead with rage. "You son of a," he started, before the click. He didn't understand. He thought I was being petty, the nerdy little brother refusing to help the star quarterback. He couldn't conceive of a world where he wasn't the one holding all the cards. I hung up the phone and turned back to my computer. A man that desperate, that deep in a hole, doesn't just quit. He finds a bigger shovel. I navigated to the state's financing statement registry, a place where high-risk business loans are recorded. I typed in Ethan's name. And there it was, filed just yesterday. A uniform commercial code lien from a company I recognized, a hard money lender out of Cheyenne. They specialized in high-interest, last-resort loans for people the banks wouldn't touch. The loan amount made my breath catch. It was staggering. It wasn't just his house he'd leveraged. It was his business. The car dealership, his inventory, everything. The interest rate was predatory. The terms were brutal. He had 90 days to begin repayment, or they would seize every asset he had. I leaned back in my chair, the screen's glow illuminating my face. He'd done it. He'd finally done it. He had pushed all his chips onto the table, betting on a hand he was never dealt. He had spent months and every dollar he could beg, borrow, or steal to perfectly grade, survey, and prepare my mine for production. The waiting was over. The time bomb I'd planted in that quiet courthouse was about to detonate, and I was holding the trigger. I let 60 more days of silence pass. From my office in Denver, I watched the satellite feed like a patient predator. The expensive machinery on the North Quarter, once a hive of activity, now sat like metal tombstones. The graded road was already showing the first signs of weeds. The hard money loan was a python, and I could feel it tightening around Ethan from 200 miles away. The 90-day clock was almost out. It was time. The drive east felt different this time. It wasn't a mission of discovery. It was an act of collection. When I arrived, the half-built fence sagged, a monument to a failed ambition. I drove my truck right past the gate, following the road Ethan's debt had built, and parked it beside a silent, million-dollar excavator. He was there. Not the swaggering king I'd last seen, but a hollowed-out version of my brother. He was sitting on a pile of tailings, his head in his hands, staring at the raw gash in the earth he'd created. He looked up as my truck door slammed shut, his eyes bloodshot and weary. "What do you want?" he rasped, his voice gravelly with defeat. "Come to see the big failure? To say, 'I told you so'?" "No," I said, walking toward him. I stopped a few feet away, my shadow falling over him. "I came to look at my property." He let out a bitter, strangled laugh. "Our property, Cal, and it's worthless. The lithium is there, more than I ever dreamed. But I can't get it out. I'm broke. The loan comes due next week. They're going to take everything. The house, the dealership, everything." He looked up at me, his face a mask of pleading and rage. "I'm ruined. And you just watched. You could have helped me, your own brother." I looked from his broken expression to the magnificent pegmatite dike he had so perfectly exposed. "It's not worthless, Ethan. It's worth hundreds of millions. Maybe more." I paused, letting the words hang in the still air. "But you're wrong about something else. It's not wartime property." From the inside pocket of my jacket, I pulled a slim manila folder. I opened it and took out a single, crisp document. A certified copy of the codicil from our grandfather's will, stamped and recorded by the county clerk. I held it out to him. He stared at it, confused. "What is this?" "It's the part of the will you laughed at," I said softly. "The part you forgot." He snatched the paper from my hand. His eyes scanned the first few lines, then darted back to the top. I watched his face as he read the words, "Sole and exclusive ownership of all mineral, subsurface, oil and gas rights on all Rowe family properties in perpetuity to my grandson Caleb Rowe." The blood drained from his face. He looked from the paper to me, his mouth opening and closing silently. "No," he whispered. "No, this is a trick. It's a fake. It's filed with the county, Ethan. Has been for months. You could have checked it any time. But you never look beneath the surface, do you?" He shot to his feet, the paper trembling in his hand. "You son of a bitch," he seethed, his voice cracking. You knew this whole time. You let me do this. You let me destroy myself." "You did this, Ethan," I said, my voice as hard and cold as the rock at our feet. "You tried to cut me out of what you thought was a joint asset. You lied. You built a fence to keep me away. You were so sure I was still the stupid kid with a rock hammer that you never once considered I might have a right you didn't." I took a step closer, my gaze sweeping across the dormant site. "You were trespassing, Ethan. Every shovelful of dirt, every dollar you spent on surveyors, on fuel, on that loan that's about to gut you. You were just improving my asset. You graded my road. You exposed my vein. You did all the preliminary work. You took all the risk." I looked him dead in the eye, the final, crushing weight of our entire lives settling between us. "Grandfather was right about you, and he was right about me. He knew who would see the flash and who would see the substance. So from the bottom of my heart, Ethan, thank you. You did a beautiful job developing my mind." He just stood there, speechless, the legal document fluttering in his grip like a dead leaf. The smug king was gone, replaced by a ghost in a kingdom he had built for his brother's coronation. I turned my back on him and walked toward my truck, the crunch of my boots on the gravel, the only sound in the vast, silent quarry. I didn't glance back. The rearview mirror was enough. Ethan was a statue of his own ruin, a tiny, broken figure shrinking against the vastness of the landscape he'd tried to steal. He thought the world was a sprint, a game of fast talk and surface appeal. He never understood that true power, like the lithium in the rock, is formed by pressure and time. I had just applied both. The silence in my truck was absolute. It wasn't the triumphant roar I might have imagined, but a deep, resonant quiet. The quiet of a settled score. The quiet of a truth finally brought to the surface. This wasn't just about a mineral deposit. It was the final, definitive answer to a question our entire lives had been asking. Who was the smart one, and who was the fool? I drove for 10 miles before pulling over onto the dusty shoulder of the road. My hands were steady on the wheel. I took out my phone and dialed my lawyer. "Sarah," I said when she answered. "It's done. He knows." "So what's the next move?" Her voice was all business. "We file the injunction, sue for damages. We can have a court order on his equipment by morning." "No," I said, watching a hawk circle high above. "Something cleaner. I want you to contact the hard money lender in Cheyenne, the one who holds the note on his dealership and his house." There was a beat of silence. "What about them?" "I'm buying the note," I said. "All of it. I'll wire the funds within the hour. I want to be his sole creditor before the sun goes down." Sarah's intake of breath was sharp. "Caleb, you could just let them foreclose. It would be less messy." "Ruin is too quick, Sarah. Forgiveness is too easy." "I'm thinking of a third option." I stared out at the horizon, the plan crystallizing, hard and perfect. "You'll draft a settlement offer. I will forgive his entire debt. In exchange, he will sign over his half-interest in the surface rights to the North Quarter for the sum of $1. He'll sign an ironclad non-disclosure agreement. And finally, he will personally drive to my office in Denver and place the keys to his car dealership on my desk." A long pause hung on the line. Then, Sarah spoke, her voice holding a new note of awe. "This was never about the lithium, was it?" "No," I said, putting the truck in gear. "It was about making him see what was there all along. So I'm asking you, what would you do? Do I show him the will and claim everything since it's legally mine? Or do I try to find a way to handle this without completely destroying my relationship with my brother?"